Hey there, magical experimenters. It's the night edition of Magical Experiments. Okay. I'm just trying to experiment partially with lighting um, at night to see, when sometimes I like to do videos at night. So I'm just trying to, get used to this new place. And I'm sure some of you have also been kind of like, is Taylor ever going to do any solo videos ever again? Yes, I'm still doing solo videos. Obviously, I'm doing one right now. I've just been doing a lot of interviews lately. Part of it is because I've really felt called toward, just doing this work around interviewing different female occultists who are like really doing amazing work and sharing that and showcasing it. And I think it's really important. So, I hope that you all are watching those videos and checking those interviews out because it's some really fascinating stuff. Of course, I hope you still end up watching my videos because I think they're cool and you'll learn some interesting stuff. But, that's been kind of important. Okay, so tonight I'm going to actually talk about something which is the principle of invitation in spirit work. Now, if you're new to this channel, click subscribe and hit the notification bell so that way you get notified whenever I go live. And if you're a frequent flyer, feel free to comment. I always like comments. So I wanted to talk about the principle of invitation in spirit work. First of all, where did I come up with this? Well, hey, Shasta. I came up with it because I had this realization based on just real life interactions and stuff that I think is important, which is that, if you want to have a good relationship with people in general, friends, romantic partners, whatever, it's always good to learn how to pay attention to the signals that they send and specifically to go to where they invite you. What I mean by that is this. I can't speak for most people, but I can say about myself that I can be a very intense and passionate person. And being an intense, passionate person, I can sometimes bowl people over when I meet them. And it's not something I necessarily mean to do, but it's something that can happen. One of the things that I've really been working on of late in the last couple months in particular is paying a lot more attention to where am I invited in? Like, what is the level of invitation? Where can I meet the person on a level that is more consensual? Not that I was not trying to be consensual before. Let me just be very clear about that. But just that sometimes like you don't know how you present yourself or the way that you come off as well as you could until other people point it out to you. And I want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with being a passionate and intense person. I'm a passionate and intense person. I always will be. But there is something to be said for recognizing how to read a situation and read the situation and read it from the perspective of how do I show up in a way where I'm respectful of the other person's boundaries and we actually have a really good time. And at the same time, I'm aware of like, the level of invitation. Like, their level of invitation is here. I could go here, but just because I could go here doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily have the level of depth I think. If anything, forcing that depth makes it artificial. But if I instead meet them at their level here, then what ends up happening is I create this mutual connection that is healthy for me and for that person. And maybe down the line it goes further down because we're getting to know each other in a way that is good and sound and isn't like just bowling everyone over. So this is an important thing, I think, that a lot of times some people struggle with. Certainly I have. So we'll leave it at that. I'm not going to comment really on anyone else. I mean, I'm just going to say sometimes I've really struggled with that. But then I began to think about it and I'm thinking this principle of invitation applies to spirit work as well, right? Now, in Western occultism, we have these grimoire traditions. We have, we have these other approaches to spirits where it's kind of like, well, I'm going to summon the spirit up, and I want the spirit to work with me, and I want it to get me X, Y, and Z. Great. And the focus isn't really on building a relationship. Now, I can say to you that my focus is always on building relationships with spirits. Sometimes, though, I'll admit, sometimes I've gone in, and I've gone into working with the spirit, and I'm kind of like, hey, spirit, can you give me, can you give me X? And it's kind of similar to what I talked about, where it's like, okay, well, the spirit's here, and I'm coming in here, and I want to go down to here instead of meeting the spirit here. And I think really that it's worth changing our approach to spirit work by actually asking ourselves, where can we meet the spirit from a place of invitation? And this is actually a form of good boundary setting for yourself, but it's also a form of good boundary setting with spirits. Because if you've ever had situations where a spirit has possessed you, I have. That can be a very unsettling experience if you're not ready for it, and if it's not something you want. I haven't always wanted the experiences that I've had. Sometimes I have, sometimes I have not. And so when I've had a spirit possess me and I haven't wanted it, it's always kind of left me afterwards feeling kind of, well, violated, like not in a good way. Like I'm like, yeah, this isn't necessarily what I want. And people could say, well, Taylor, if you're such a great magician, why couldn't you control that? And my answer to that would be, when you're working with spirits and everything else, sometimes depending on your approach, sometimes it doesn't work that way. And sometimes when you're working with spirits, and this is something I think anyone could recognize and address, if you're working with them in a way that is much more experiential, it can be one of those things where it's just like, they come in and boom, there they are. And you can set some boundaries in place. I mean, I certainly have before, but as I began thinking about this, I thought, what if I apply this concept of invitation to spirits and apply it from a twofold approach? One is, asking the spirit, hey, what level do you want to connect with me at? And the second one is, what level do I want you to connect with me at? And can we come to that consensual agreement? And what I found is that when I applied this principle of invitation to spirit work, that it works rather well. I've been doing this of late because I'm doing a Goetic Demon a week. I'm going through Stephanie Connolly's Patreon class, and it's really cool. Highly recommend it. And I've been applying it, this principle of invitation to that work with the spirits, where I'm like, look, here's where I'm willing to meet you. And here's where here's where I'll invite you in. And is that the level you want to be at? Do you want to be higher or lower, so to speak, or however you want to put it? And can we come to an accommodation? And I'm finding that this is working really well. And I've also been applying this to a couple other things, like doing some work with elementals and stuff. Now, it's not quite the same as having a conversation with a person where you're like, hey, so-and-so, I want to hang out with you. And like, what are your boundaries? But it is, I think, nonetheless, an important lesson and realization around spirit work and around how you present yourself and how you show up in the world. And there's something to be said for just simply recognizing that, it is okay to have better boundaries, both in terms of the relationships you have with people and the relationships you have with spirits. And you're saying, Shasta, that you have a Goetia experiment in the works. Oh, that's cool. And that you really like the idea. Cool. Well, hey, feel free to apply it. You know how it goes. Think of it this way too. Think of it as like if you were trying to approach like someone else's pet, right? Whether it's a dog or a cat or whatever else. If the dog or cat doesn't want to interact with you, they're not going to interact with you. And in fact, they might get downright hostile, scratch you or bite you or whatever else. But if you approach them from a very careful perspective and allow them to just kind of get to know you on their level of comfort, then you get better results. Well, why can't we apply that to people and spirits as well? Because let's be honest here, with people, we see the results pretty quickly. If you approach somebody and you're trying to have more of a relationship than they're willing, what are they going to do? They're going to push you away. They don't want to be around you. They're going to be like, no, go and get away from me. I don't want that. Or, or they'll just, they'll just be like, hey, like, they'll shut you down, or maybe they'll stay in your life, but they'll be like, they're not going to want to interact with you as much. That's not fun. I can say that from personal experience. Like, and you can be the friendliest person in the world. I mean, I'm definitely a friendly person, but that doesn't matter. Like, your intent can be like, oh, well, my intention is being friendly, but the impact is not. And that's something that we want to pay attention to. When we apply this to spirits, it's the same thing. Like, okay, your intention might be, well, let's just be honest here. A lot of Western occultists, their intention is, I want to get my results, and that's all I really care about. Well, like, look, if you're coming in with that kind of an attitude, then don't be surprised that the spirits don't want anything to do with you. It's obnoxious. This is why I always say, work with the spirits, build a relationship with them, collaborate with them, just like you would want to do with a person. Like, you wouldn't want, again, taking this principle of invitation and really applying it a little bit further. You wouldn't want someone to invite themselves into your home and start messing around with your stuff. They could be the friendliest person. They could mean well, but it doesn't matter if they're being obnoxious. And they may not even realize they're being obnoxious. I mean, sometimes that is the case. Some people can genuinely be clueless. Again, I can be one of those people. So, but once you have a clue by four and you realize, like, oh, this is how I've shown up, that's when it's in time to make the changes. And so, like, with the spirit work, that's kind of where I've been approaching it, where I'm thinking to myself, if I've been this way in this way, have I been this way with spirits as well? And how can I be a better magical practitioner, but also a better collaborator and friend to spirits? And look, I get that for a lot of Western occultists, it's like, no, I'm going to smack them around and tell them what I want them to do and call the angels up and yada, 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 all that good stuff. But that isn't my approach. I've always wanted to build relationship with spirits. And just as I don't necessarily want spirits to come rummaging around in me and causing me to, possessing me, unless I choose that, at the same time, I don't want to be like, hey, spirit, you got to go do this, or X, Y, and Z, or I'm gonna sick the angels on you, or whatever. Again, it really boils down to, how do you want to be treated? And this is where, okay, the golden rule. I know, I'm not like a huge fan of Christianity, but the goal, there are some good principles, and the golden rule is, treat others as you would have them treat you. Well, basically, why shouldn't we apply that to spirit work? Now, I've said that before. This is nothing. This is nothing new per se. This is just a wrinkle on top of what I've already said about relationships with spirits. It really just comes right down to, how do you want to show up? What level do you want to interact with the spirit with? And this is good boundary setting for yourself as well as the spirit. It's good boundary setting in general. Because if you go into a situation and you're like, this is the level of interaction that I want and that I'm comfortable with, that can actually help you set better boundaries, where you can say to somebody like, look, I know you mean well, you want to be friendly with me, but that's not where I'm at today. Or, hey, I'd like to go deeper with you, but I'm recognizing that you don't want to go to that depth. And I'm okay with that. And I can just meet you at the depth you're willing to go to. The same thing with spirits. I can meet you at the depth that you're willing to go to and not take it any further. To the spirits, why can't we say that? Why shouldn't we say that? Why, some people will say, but Taylor, you've got to approach the spirits, in the way that we're, the prescribed ways, whatever else. And I'll say, well, that's a bunch of BS. I've never approached spirits the way that, the grimoire way. I mean, because I fundamentally don't agree with it. And I find that I get just as tangible results, if not better results, quite frankly, from the sounds of it than what I hear other people get. And I don't have spirits burning down my house or, creating havoc in my life like I've heard some people have had. So, like, maybe that's some food for thought there. Like, instead of us acting like we're above the spirits or below them, because sometimes you have people who take the opposite tack, right? But instead of acting like we're above or below, why don't we just recognize that we're really with the spirits? and that we can work with the spirits, not work for the spirits or have the spirits work for us, but work with. What a radical idea that might change the approach of how we work with spirits and might help us really develop, better relationships with them. And this is true whether you're working with a daemon, an elemental, an angel, or a deity, or whatever else. And I'm not saying here that you shouldn't show respect. Like, you're working, like for example, when I work with Aphrodite, or I work with Ishtar, or one of the other deities that I work with, I'm definitely going to approach them with respect. Don't get me wrong. You show respect, but that's my point. Like, this whole invitation thing is about respect. Show respect to the people in your life, the pets in your life, the animals in general, plants in general. Show respect to the spirits. Shasta says, when I approach them and ask for the counsel, they will grace you with their wisdom and teachings. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. So like, how we choose to approach things, how we choose to approach a situation matters, and how we choose to work with the spirits. So this is where this concept of the principle of invitation comes in. And again, I mean, some of this is really just hard-earned experience on my part, just me really looking at some of my own behaviors and really seeing like where sometimes I've meant well, truly had good intention, but nonetheless, I came in too hot, too intense, whatever else. Hey there, Abnormal. Thanks. Nice to finally meet you, so to speak, live here. But seriously, it came down to that. So like, when you're working with a spirit, try and apply the principle of invitation. Ask yourself, like, what level of interaction do I want to have? What level am I comfortable with? And put that out there. And then at the same time, when you connect with the spirit, same thing. And remember that, yes, showing respect is important, but knowing what the level is that you can go to and work with is just as important. And then apply the same principle to the people in your life. What level are you willing to invite somebody to connect with you? What level are they willing to connect with you at? And how can you mesh that so that you actually have really genuine, awesome connections? These are good things to consider and apply in our magical life, but also in our regular everyday lives. And I think that you get a lot further in all of your interactions when you take an approach that is based on mutual respect and recognizing where people are, where spirits are, where the pets are, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. But it makes a difference. All right, so folks, that's it. Just to show you guys that, yes, we will still have the occasional live video, actually more than occasional. Like I said, I've been focused on the interviews lately. And, Abnormal was saying, this is gold, something I need to apply. I always love hearing these tidbits. Helps so much when you come back to something you think you've experienced with and someone like you has a gold nugget. Well, thank you. It's hard-earned experience. And you said you haven't read this in a book before. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, a lot of these books don't apply that. It is actually in. I have actually written about it a bit in Walking with Elemental Spirits, which I'm writing right now. So you'll see that, and I'm definitely going to be including it in future books that I'm writing on the spirit work that I'm doing, because I do think it's a really important principle, and I've kind of talked about it a bit in a way in Walking with Spirits. I was talking about experiential embodiment. That was like the more theoretical book out of the books that I've written so far on the spirit work. But I will say Walking with Elemental Spirits is coming along. I'm on chapter 6, and I think it'll be probably about 9 chapters, maybe 10. So it is coming along, and I am really freaking happy about that. And I look forward to sharing that with you guys. And later this month, Inner Alchemy of Wintering is coming out, which is my book about how to recover from spiritual burnout. So if any of you ever experience that, or you ever think you might, you should definitely pick that up. And okay, so you said, have you thought about those portals with Kabbalah Practice? Since you mentioned it, I kind of have. The interesting thing about that is I'm doing a lot of work around what is called the Sphere of Art, which is a ritual practice that I learned from R.J. Stewart. I've made some modifications to it, but one of the things that I've done is I do work with the Kabbalistic tree of life regularly. And so there may be something to that, and it's certainly something I'll probably explore. Right now, I'm super focused on the spirit work because that's kind of the direction that I've been called to work on, both in terms of writing books and also the practice that I'm doing right now. Both solo and with my partner. But I mean, that's something that I think I could see myself exploring further, and I wouldn't be surprised if she was interested in it too, because we both are pretty experimental when it comes to things and like to get into stuff. Anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. Really appreciate you watching the video. Feel free to give it a like. Thank you for the comments. I really appreciate that. And take care, everyone.